Hi everyone, it's Rachel. So I'm here tonight to talk about Fanguary, a fun reading challenge hosted by Candy over at Candy, Soul, and Soil. So Fanguary was February's reading prompt as part of her Candy Reading Challenge 2025. I'm pretty sure I got the name right. I had a blast with Fanguary. So I didn't read all of the books that I mentioned in my previous Fanguary video. However, I did, of course, read Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, this was a reread for me, and I remember when I read it, I think a couple of years ago for the first time, I absolutely loved it. When I was finished reading it, I missed it. I found it so comforting somehow. However, there were some things that annoyed me, and I won't really get into them here because when I reread this and gave it another shot, although I had given it 4 stars, I think the first time around, I think I might have to bump that up to 5 after this reread. All the things I found annoying the first time around, I found well placed during this reread. I can't quite explain it. I think my hiccups the first time around were I thought that there were far too many passages with not enough action. Too much of the characters going on about their plan and how they were going to defeat this monster. However, this time I felt that's part of the heartbeat of the novel, this band of characters bonding over this journey. And this was the annotated version, as I've mentioned many times. It's so beautiful. I'm probably going to be inserting some photos of some of the illustrations. This is the annotated version by Leonard Wolf, and I will get into him later, but the annotations were a blast. There's a lot of place names in here. It goes over the cultures of the peoples, given the settings, because all of the places I believe in this novel were places that really existed. It took place in London and Whitby and Transylvania and some other places as well. And you're given some vampire lore and some psychology as well. So I just find this such a comfort read. It's the setting. I love Jonathan Harker's journey in the beginning, his stays at the little inns. He goes on about the beauty of the landscape and the mountains in his diary, and the beauty of the seaside town Whitby, where Mina and Lucy are vacationing for a time. The little graveyard that they sat in overlooking the sea. One of the most beautiful passages was the storm that took place and the way that the sky changed as the storm was rolling in. And if you've read the novel or seen some of the film adaptations, you know what comes along with that storm. Dracula on the ghost ship. It's just so beautiful, and none of the film adaptations that I have seen have quite captured it the way that Bram Stoker does. It's just gorgeous writing. I wish I could read it aloud to you, but I digress. This book really hit me hard this time around. I think it's because I've recently gone through some rather harrowing experiences that I can't really talk about. I can't disclose them here, but I recommend this book to those who have suffered trauma and maybe denial. Because if we continue to deny what scares us, to bury unpleasant experiences, we don't heal. We fail to grow. Because those fears and traumas are impossible to eradicate through denial. They're just impossible to eradicate. They lie forever in our subconscious and become nightmares, which are to the detriment of our waking lives. So there's a passage in the novel where Jonathan Harker explains to his wife that he kept a diary during his stay at Count Dracula's castle. And he doesn't exactly know what's in the diary because he doesn't want to admit that it actually happened. Or rather, he's afraid that the things that happened to him were hallucinations. So he's worried that maybe he's lost his mind. And he gives her the diary, in confidence, but he asks her to promise him that she won't read it. Something like that. I think he gave her permission to read it if she really felt the need, but they vow to one another that they'll never open that diary and read what's in it. So Jonathan Harker, after his travails at the castle, he comes home a broken man. And it's his wife, Mina, who seeks guidance from Van Helsing for answers. And once Van Helsing informs Mina that what happened to her husband did in fact happen, because he has experience of it, of vampires, but he doesn't tell her that right off the bat, Jonathan is able to heal and face the Count head on. And oh my God, I don't know if that struck me the first time reading it, but it did now, given the circumstances that I've recently gone through. So let me see if I can find the passage to read to you. All right. So here, Jonathan is going to meet Van Helsing for the first time, and Mina has already met him, but Van Helsing is expecting to meet a very sick man because Mina had asked him, like, please, please heal my husband. I miss this man that he was. But Madame Mina told me you were ill and that you had had a shock. It was so funny to hear my wife called Madame Mina by this kindly, strong-faced old man. I smiled and said, I was ill. I have had a shock, but you have cured me already. And how? By your letter to Mina last night. I was in doubt, and then everything took a hue of unreality, and I did not know what to trust, even the evidence of my own senses. Not knowing what to trust, I did not know what to do, and so had only to keep on working in what had been the groove of my life. The groove ceased to avail me, and I mistrusted myself. Doctor, you don't know what it is to doubt everything, even yourself. So, again, I won't reiterate what I already said, but it's so important to face the truth. It sounds so cheesy, but it's true. The truth will set you free. And I loved how, maybe it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but at the end, the surviving characters decide that they're going to keep these journals and letters, correspondence, cataloging all of the events, harrowing as they were. They're going to keep these forever and maybe give them to their children to read because they made it through the fire. I just think that that's so important. And I know that facing the truth and what scares me on my journey has lifted a huge, huge weight off of me over the years. Although epiphanies can be hard to take, it's so important. The other thing that I really loved about the book is the way that Bram Stoker wrote the women. I think especially Mina was an extremely strong character, and from my understanding, I think that he modeled her after some of the strong women in his life. And Something that struck me was that every time the men decided to leave the women out of their confidence and their plan because they wanted to protect them, every time they left the women out, everyone suffered for it in a very negative way. And then they'd come back together and decide, all right, we have to tell Mina the truth. Like all right, sorry, my boyfriend's blowing his nose. All right, we have to tell Mina. We're going to bring her back into our confidence. And then lo and behold, she will have some answer to some puzzle they can't solve. She's really revered as this hero by the other characters. So I think that was intentional on Bram Stoker's behalf. The trust between men and women, between everyone. What else did I want to say about Dracula? I am definitely going to read it again at some point. I don't know when. But yeah, I would say that this might be a 5-star this time around. So, what else did I read? Only a couple of things. I reread the guidebook to the Vampire Tarot by Robert M. Place. I'm not going to really talk about this too much because I feel bad. I know this deck is long out of print. It's such a shame. Hopefully it will be reprinted one day. But you all know how much I love it, and I think I've talked about the book a bit already. However, to those of you who have the deck and haven't read the book, please give it a shot. It was so much fun as a companion piece to Dracula. And I also had fun crocheting this little pouch for the Vampire Tarot. I crocheted this while watching a Dracula movie with my daughter the other night. And I love this yarn. It's like so soft. I love crocheting these little bags because it's like my decks, they have this little Afghan wrapped around them. So cozy. And the other book that I read wasn't planned. I didn't talk about this in my other February video, but it's A Dream of Dracula in Search of the Living Dead by Leonard Woolf. So this happened because while reading the annotations, he referenced this book a couple of times, not to promote himself, but because he had already gone over some of these things already. And then he said that he wanted to expound on those ideas a bit in his annotations for Dracula. So anyway, he had published this, I believe, before the annotated Dracula came out. And this book is from the early 70s. And it's, in the beginning, it's very 70s. So there's this scene where he's this professor and he's sort of admiring the bodies of young students, not like kids, but college students. And at first I was like, that's a little icky, but then you realize, okay, so it's the late 60s, 70s. That was kind of the vibe, and nothing really happens. I don't think he was a predator, but just be warned. Leonard Woolf, I didn't know this when I was reading Dracula and also his annotated Frankenstein that I read for Gothlit November. He was actually Romanian, which is pretty cool. He was Romanian, and for a time he taught at San Francisco State University in the late 60s, and he founded the Happening House, which is, affiliated with the hippie movement and all of that. Perfect setting for a vampire novel from the 70s, right? A Romanian in San Francisco. But yeah, he was one of the lead experts on Dracula at the time. And he had actually, it's in this book, he had put out an advertisement in the papers for an interview, and the heading was, "Are you a vampire?" Which must have been so funny to read during your morning coffee, right? And I was just thinking to myself, and a lot of people responded to it, and there is a chapter where he is interviewing this young man who drinks blood, not for the faint of heart. But anyway, I was thinking, I wonder if that's where Anne Rice got her inspiration for Interview with the Vampire. It's kind of cute. So anyway, this I have read in some reviews. It's been called a beautiful meditation on vampires, and it is that, but it is also a meditation on death. So it can be very heavy at times. If you're interested in this, just be aware of that. He talks to hospice patients and all sorts of different people. And there was a segment in here actually where he was getting his blood drawn for a blood drive. It wasn't anything, but that actually was hard for me to read because I've always struggled with that. This was fascinating, and it included some fun photos, like some photography of the scenes from the novel Dracula. And oh yeah, here's Christopher Lee. I found myself a little bit bored here and there, but then I realized it wasn't, detriment to Leonard Woolf. It was simply that I had read recently, back to back, 2 nonfiction works on Gothic literature. So some of this history that he was discussing, I had already read a couple of times over or more. So it wasn't anything new to me. So again, this is not for the faint of heart, but this was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. So those were my reads, but I also wanted to mention that while I was reading Dracula, I came across a recipe that Jonathan Harker ate in an inn, and it's called Paprika Hendl. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's a Hungarian dish. It's also known as paprikash, and I did mention this in my previous video. So I'm here to say it was one of the most amazing things I've ever had. And we loved it so much that we made it twice. Like, we made it on Valentine's Day, and we lit the fire in the fireplace and watched Bela Lugosi Dracula afterwards. Such a fun Valentine's Day with my daughter and my boyfriend. And then a week later, I made it again. I just had so much fun, and the dumplings were just a ball. They're just so cute and so much fun to make. I'd never made dumplings before like that. Very easy too, and I love that it's not ingredient heavy. You just have to make sure that you have high quality paprika. So I ordered my paprika, I think through Amazon, but there's probably a bunch of other places. And if I remember, I will include the recipe below. There's many recipes. But yeah, again, this is owing to Leonard Woolf's annotated Dracula, because it included a recipe for the dish that Jonathan Harker was oogling over. And I don't blame him, because seriously, I'm already planning on making it again this week. It's just delicious. And I will say I used half hot and half sweet paprika. The recipe, if I do remember to link it below, doesn't really specify hot or sweet. And I used 1 onion instead of 3. So amazing. Amazing. So we watched some movies, my daughter and I. She has not read Dracula. I'm sure she'll read it at some point. But of course, I already mentioned we watched the 1931 Dracula with Bela Lugosi. And here he is. Say hi, everyone. I'm such a dork. So every time I watch this, I love it more and more. I think it's just so good. It's so iconic. And you know what? None of the film adaptations has got the novel quite right. But having seen so many of them, especially this year, I see this one is actually not really far off the mark. This was based, I believe, on the stage adaptation that Bela Lugosi was already known for. And they had, they had time constraints. So, for example, they melded the character of Jonathan Harker and Renfield into one because they only had so much time. So you see Jonathan Harker's journey to the castle in the beginning, and it's beautifully shot and very atmospheric, great dialogue, but that's actually, instead of Jonathan Harker, it's Renfield. So sorry for people who haven't read Dracula if I'm giving spoilers, but you don't have to watch. And Jonathan Harker is in the movie, but he's sort of like, a side character, the beau of Mina. It's an excellent film and one of the creepiest Renfields ever. Just love it. What else did we watch? We watched Dracula AD 1972. This is a DVD that has 4 Christopher Lee Dracula films in here. Now, my daughter loves Dracula, and we've seen all of these together over the years around Halloween time. And Dracula AD 1972 is probably one of the most ridiculous. I'm not even going to give you a synopsis or anything, but the soundtrack is killer. It's just so 70s and just out of place. Like, I love the 70s, but oh man. We'd seen it a handful of times, but of course she wanted to watch it again. And I remember my boyfriend, he was in the room and the movie had started. It was just a few minutes in and there's this battle between Dracula and Van Helsing. They're fighting on top of a carriage racing through the woods, and the music, and my boyfriend, he's like, oh, this is a comedy. Is this a comedy? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's just really, really bad. So that was fun. We just love Dracula AD 1972 with Johnny Alucard. All-time favorite. We watched Dracula Untold, which was a movie that came out in like 1914, guys. I'm in another century. 2014. My daughter really wanted to see it. I didn't think that I was really going to enjoy it much. It was okay. It was, it's supposed to be the backstory of how Dracula became the man, but it was really more like an action film, like a superhero type film. And it was okay if you like that sort of thing. She really enjoyed it. I might have enjoyed it more if I had been younger. And we also watched Dracula from 1979. This is the Frank Langella as Dracula, and Laurence Olivier is in here as Van Helsing. Now, this movie was really interesting. I hadn't actually seen it before. I bought it for February because it was cheap enough. And there's many departures from the novel, but I'll say right off the bat, the film started beautiful cinematography and the music was gorgeous. And I was like, I really like this music. I'm like, it sounds a bit like John Williams. And then lo and behold, there in the credits, it says music by John Williams. So cool. It's just straight out of that era of like Indiana Jones and Star Wars, So there's interesting departures. For some reason, I don't know why they do this. They swapped the names of Mina and Lucy. And this is really more of like a romantic take on Dracula. It really romances up, Mina's victimization. And my daughter really liked that, though. She's like, I liked how she was kind of evil. Or you're not sure, like, if she's just in a trance or if that's really just who she is. It's interesting that there wasn't any scenes in Transylvania. The film begins with the ghost ship coming in during the storm. And I'll say that was actually really beautifully shot. one of the better depictions of the ship coming into Whitby. But then, you know, Dracula lands and then he meets everybody at some house party. And, you know, I get it, whatever, but that's just interesting to me. But there's been so many adaptations of Dracula, and I read that actually I think Dracula holds the record for adaptations like that from book to screen. Like, there's so many Dracula movies that I probably won't even watch in this lifetime. Another one that we watched was Nosferatu. Now, this is the 1979 Werner Herzog film. My daughter had seen the F.W. Murnau's 1922, is it 1921 or 1922? She'd seen the silent film version with me a few years ago. So this is a remake. And I mentioned this in another video, but I did go to see Robert Eggers' Nosferatu in the theater with my boyfriend on New Year's Eve. Oh, just gorgeous. No, my daughter did not see this. This is not appropriate. But we did watch this, and this is beautiful as well. And if you're not familiar with Nosferatu, I know I've gone over this in another video, but with the silent version, they wanted to make, it's a German film, they wanted to make Dracula, but they didn't have the rights or were worried about that, so they changed the names and some things about the plot. So it's very similar to Dracula, but there are some major differences, especially with the ending. And yeah. So this is quite close to this and this, I suppose, but there was a surprise for me at the end of this that I was not expecting. Very beautifully shot. Again, there's this sense that Lucy is sort of like, I don't know why they call her Lucy again. I guess maybe they liked the name better than Mina. And in this version, and I think in the silent, she's called Ellen. She's ignored constantly. She pleads with Jonathan, don't go, I sense something bad. She's ignored. She pleads with the people in the town that she needs help trying to find where the creature sleeps, and we need to put an end to the plague, and no one will listen to her. And, you know, finally, I think somebody says near the end, like, oh, I should have listened to her. But anyway, just a beautiful, reflective film. And my daughter really enjoyed it. She said that she really, really liked this. She really liked the 1979 Frank Langella Dracula. So what else? What else about February? I just had such a blast with this. Thank you, Candy, for this fun reading challenge. It meant so much to me, actually, this year. I just felt so, I don't know, I felt so heard rereading Bram Stoker's Dracula. I really did. So many of the things that I've tried to tell people in my life that I love very much, the same lessons that I had learned and I tried to impart, and I don't know as it's necessarily been heeded, it was all in Dracula. It was all here, and it just made me feel very heard, and I'm going to remember that. It's going to reiterate the way I feel about certain things, about facing the truth. So before I get all sappy, I'm going to wrap this up, but if you're still here, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.